Do you know what it feels like to watch your own mother apologize for something that wasn't even her fault? I do. I was only 10 years old when I watched the richest woman in our city point at the spotless marble floor and say, "Clean it again." My mother didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She simply lowered her head and started scrubbing the same floor for the second time. 20 years later, I stood in front of that very mansion, holding the property deed in my hands. The people who once treated my mother like she was invisible had no idea who I was. And the moment I handed my mother the keys, everything changed. But to understand why that moment meant so much, you first need to know who she really was. My name is Ethan Carter, and this is the story of the strongest person I've ever known, my mother. Before we begin, if you love emotional drama stories filled with sacrifice, karma, and unforgettable endings, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. We didn't grow up with much. Our apartment was so small that from my bed I could almost touch the kitchen table. Whenever it rained, water leaked through the ceiling. Instead of complaining, my mother would place old pots and buckets around the room and joke that we had our own indoor waterfall. Back then, I laughed. Now I realize she was just trying to protect my childhood. Every morning before sunrise, she quietly got ready for work. She wore the same faded cleaning uniform almost every day. Before leaving, she'd gently kiss my forehead and whisper, "I'll be home before dinner." No matter how exhausted she was, she never forgot that kiss. Her workplace was the biggest mansion in the city. People admired it from outside its massive iron gates. Luxury cars lined the driveway. A fountain sparkled in the front yard. It looked like a place where dreams came true. But for my mother, it was simply where she spent every day cleaning someone else's dream. One afternoon, my school closed early. Excited to surprise her, I walked all the way to the mansion. I thought she'd smile when she saw me. Instead, I witnessed something that changed my life forever. My mother was on her knees, carefully polishing the marble floor. Just then, the owner of the mansion walked in. She glanced at the floor for barely a second before saying coldly, "You're getting slower. I expect better." Without saying a word, my mother apologized. Then, she started cleaning the same spotless floor all over again. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell that woman she was wrong. But before I could speak, the owner noticed me standing nearby. She looked me up and down, then frowned. "So that's your son?" My mother nodded nervously. The woman sighed. "Employees shouldn't bring children here. This is a mansion, not a shelter." Those words hit me harder than anything I'd ever heard. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to defend herself. She didn't. She simply held my hand and quietly led me outside. As we walked home in silence, I finally asked, "Mom, why didn't you tell her she was wrong?" She smiled, even though I could see tears forming in her eyes. "Because sometimes," she whispered, "keeping your job is more important than winning an argument." That night, for the first time in my life, I heard my mother crying after she thought I had fallen asleep. And in that moment, I made a promise that would change both of our lives forever. A promise that sounded completely impossible for a 10-year-old boy, but I meant every single word. I looked toward the ceiling and quietly whispered, "One day, I'm going to buy that mansion." I had no idea how. I had no money, no connections, no plan. All I had was a promise, and I was willing to spend my entire life keeping it. The next morning, life went back to normal. At least, that's what my mother wanted me to believe. She smiled like nothing had happened. She packed my lunch. She reminded me to study hard. Then she walked out the door, wearing that same worn-out cleaning uniform. But after seeing how she was treated, I wasn't the same anymore. From that day on, I studied with only one goal: not to become rich, not to become famous, but to make sure my mother would never have to bow her head to anyone again. Every night, while other kids played outside, I sat at our tiny kitchen table doing homework. The table wobbled, the light above us flickered, and my mother, exhausted after cleaning the mansion all day, still sat beside me. She couldn't help with my math. She had left school at a young age, but she'd always say, "I may not know the answers, but I know you can find them." Those words pushed me harder than any teacher ever could. One evening, I noticed something strange. My mother wasn't eating dinner. She kept saying she had already eaten at work. At first, I believed her. Then one night, I opened the refrigerator after she went to bed. There was almost nothing inside, just a bottle of water and half a loaf of bread. That's when I understood. She hadn't been eating at work. She'd been skipping meals, so I could have enough. The next morning, I pretended I wasn't hungry and tried to give her my breakfast. She smiled and gently pushed the plate back toward me. Growing boys need food more than mothers do. I wanted to argue. Instead, I silently promised myself I'd never let her sacrifice like that again. A few weeks later, my school announced its annual science competition. The winner would receive a full scholarship to one of the best high schools in the state. It was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. But there was one problem. I needed materials for my project. Even the cheapest supplies cost more than we could afford. I told my mother not to worry. "I'll think of something." She simply nodded. The next evening, she came home much later than usual. Her hands were covered in tiny cuts. She looked completely exhausted, but she was smiling. She reached into her bag and placed the project materials on the table. Every single thing I needed. "Mom, where did you get the money?" "Oh," she said casually. "I worked a few extra hours." Years later, I found out the truth. She hadn't just worked overtime. She had taken on another cleaning job after leaving the mansion. She worked nearly 18 hours that day, just so I wouldn't have to give up on my dream. Looking back, I don't know how she even stayed on her feet. The day of the competition finally arrived. I gave everything I had. When the principal announced first place, I froze. Ethan Carter. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. I had won. The scholarship was mine. I searched the crowd until I found my mother. She was standing in the back of the auditorium, still wearing her cleaning uniform because she'd come straight from work. She was clapping harder than anyone else. Tears streamed down her face. In that moment, I realized something. Winning that scholarship wasn't my achievement alone. It belonged to the woman who had sacrificed every meal, every hour of sleep, and every ounce of strength she had for me. But neither of us knew. Someone had been quietly watching my progress. Someone connected to the very mansion where my mother worked. And that person was about to change the course of my life forever. Partois. A few days after winning the scholarship, something unexpected happened. My mother came home holding an envelope. She looked nervous, almost scared. "What's wrong?" I asked. She handed me the envelope. It was from the Ashford family, the owners of the mansion. My heart immediately sank. I thought I had done something wrong, but when I opened it, I couldn't believe what I was reading. Inside was an invitation to a scholarship recognition dinner being hosted at the mansion. Apparently, news of my academic success had reached them. For the first time in my life, I was being invited through the front door. The night of the event, I borrowed a suit that was slightly too big. My mother spent nearly an hour ironing it so it would look perfect. When we arrived, the mansion looked even bigger than I remembered. Crystal lights sparkled everywhere. Luxury cars filled the driveway. People in expensive clothes laughed and talked as if they had never worried about money a day in their lives. I felt completely out of place. Then I noticed something. While guests entered through the front entrance, my mother quietly slipped away toward the service door. Even at an event honoring me, she was still expected to work. That realization broke my heart. During dinner, several guests praised my achievements. Some even asked about my future plans. I proudly said, "One day, I want to build a successful company." People smiled politely, but I noticed a few amused looks around the table, as if my dream was entertaining rather than realistic. One businessman even laughed softly. Ambition is free, son. The table chuckled. I forced a smile. But inside, I made another promise. One day, they wouldn't be laughing. Years passed. I graduated at the top of my class. Then college. Then business school. But success didn't happen overnight. In fact, my first business failed completely. I lost nearly everything I had saved. For months, I questioned myself. Maybe those people at the mansion had been right. Maybe I was dreaming too big. One evening, feeling defeated, I visited my mother. She was still cleaning the mansion, still working long hours, still smiling despite everything. When I told her about my failure, she listened quietly. Then she said something I'll never forget. Do you know how many times I cleaned the same floor before it finally shined? I shook my head. She smiled. As many times as it took. That was it. No long speech. No complicated advice. Just one sentence. And somehow, it gave me the strength to keep going. So I started again. This time, wiser. This time, stronger. I launched a logistics company from a tiny rented office with only 2 employees. We worked day and night. Slowly, clients started coming. Then more. Then even more. Years passed. The company grew faster than I ever imagined. We expanded into multiple cities. Our revenue skyrocketed. And for the first time in my life, money stopped being a problem. But there was something strange. Even after achieving everything I once dreamed about, I still felt like I had unfinished business. Then one morning, I received a phone call that changed everything. The Ashford estate was being sold. I nearly dropped my phone. The mansion. The same mansion where my mother had spent 20 years cleaning floors. The same mansion where she'd been humiliated. The same mansion I had promised to buy when I was 10 years old. For a moment, I just sat there in silence. Because suddenly, that childhood promise didn't seem impossible anymore. It seemed real, and I knew exactly what I had to do. What happened next shocked not only the Ashford family, but my mother as well. The day of the closing arrived. I walked into the mansion wearing a black suit. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the grand staircase. The only difference was, this time, I wasn't standing there as the maid's son. I was the buyer. The Ashford family sat across the table with their lawyers. They greeted me politely, never recognizing the little boy they had humiliated years ago. After the final document was signed, the realtor smiled. Congratulations, Mr. Carter. The Ashford estate officially belongs to you. For a moment, I closed my eyes. I had done it, not for revenge, not to prove I was richer than anyone else, but to fulfill a promise I had made to my mother when I was just 10 years old. There was only one thing left to do. I called my mother. Mom, can you come to the mansion? She sounded confused. Why would I go there? I don't work today. I just need you to trust me. About 30 minutes later, she arrived wearing the same simple clothes she had always worn. She looked at the front gate and smiled. I never thought I'd come back here as a visitor. I walked toward her, without saying a word. I placed a small silver key in her hand. She looked at it, puzzled. What is this? I smiled. Go ahead. Open the front door. She laughed nervously. Ethan, don't joke like that. I'm serious. With trembling hands, she walked to the entrance. The key fit perfectly. The door slowly opened. She turned around, completely confused. I took a deep breath. Then I said the words I had waited 20 years to say. Mom, you cleaned this mansion for 20 years. Today, it's yours. For a few seconds, she simply stared at me. Then tears filled her eyes. She shook her head over and over. No, this can't be real. I handed her the property deed. Her hands started shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She looked from the papers to me, then wrapped her arms around me and cried harder than I had ever seen. Not because of the mansion, but because someone had finally seen every sacrifice she had ever made. Just then, a familiar voice came from behind us. Mrs. Ashford. She had returned to collect a few personal belongings. The moment she saw us standing inside the entrance, she frowned. Then, she looked at the deed in my mother's hands. Finally, she looked at me. You're... I nodded. The little boy you once called a shelter child. Silence filled the hallway. She lowered her eyes. I owe both of you an apology. My mother gently squeezed my hand. Then she surprised everyone. It's okay. I forgave you a long time ago. That was my mother. Even after everything, she chose peace over bitterness. A few months later, we transformed part of the mansion into a community learning center where children from low-income families could study for free. My mother personally welcomed every child who walked through those doors. The woman who had once cleaned the mansion now opened its doors to people who had never been given a chance. Sometimes, people ask me why I didn't seek revenge. My answer is always the same. Because success isn't making someone else feel small. Success is lifting up the people who sacrificed everything for you. If your parents are still with you, love them, appreciate them, thank them while you still can. Because no amount of money can repay the silent sacrifices they make every single day. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves their mother. Your support helps us continue bringing powerful emotional drama stories with meaningful endings. Until next time, take care of the people who have always taken care of you.